Hi, I'm Richard Rose, Artistic Director of the Tarragon Theatre, and it gives me great pleasure to interview and speak with Kevin Loring, who's the Artistic Director of the Indigenous Theatre at National Arts Centre and the Artistic Director of Savage Society. And Kevin is the director of The Herd and has been working on the play with us. Indigenous Theatre and Tarragon have been working together on this play for about a couple of years, and we're excited to present this first iteration and hopefully do the real play very soon in our theaters. Hopefully, very soon. Kevin, how are you doing? Are you surviving this time?
Yeah, surviving. It's oddly busy for us at the NAC because we do a lot of platforming of work onto our digital platforms, like putting work onto the digital platforms that we have access to, and all of the work institutionally that's going on. With a lot of these really important issues that we are all facing, I think systemically and nationally as a
Right.
society, they
Right.
they impact and reach into institutions like the NAC pretty deeply. And so there's a lot of internal soul searching, I think, with a lot of our national institutions, and the NAC is no different.
As an Indigenous artist, the NAC, are you taking some leadership in that, or are you a backboard to bounce off feelings, thoughts? Because it's a unique role.
We are for sure a part of all of those conversations, and it's, of course, I have an amazing team, so it's not just me. It's Laurie Marchand, the managing director, and other members of our team that are involved at all levels of the institution, like having these conversations and advising and giving our input and our perspective as the sort of the only racialized company in the or department in the
Yes,
in the
right.
building.
That's soon to change too with NAC English Theatre. Black Theatre Workshop, I believe, is coming in to present a couple of plays during their season or take over part of the season.
It's pretty exciting to have Black Theatre Workshop being in the building. Hopefully they can actually be in the building, but they're curating half the season alongside Jillian, so that's amazing.
Great. Now, tell us about what you're platforming so that Tarragon audience members, what they can come and see online and how they can come and see on it.
So there's been a number of initiatives since the lockdowns have happened over the last year that we've been a part of. So there was the Canada Performs initiative that we had a hand in curating a lot of the Indigenous submissions, well, all of the Indigenous submissions. Also with the Grand Acts of Theatre, we had a hand in some of that curation process as well. That's English Theatre's initiative. And we have our own upcoming initiatives. So we have like one that's basically like pod stories called Indigenous Cities. And we're just in the process of building that project now. So it'll be hopefully rolled out like across the country over the years. But in the this first coming year, it'll be in Vancouver, Saskatoon, and Ottawa, just to get it off the ground. And those are stories that will be an oral experience, an audio experience, that are shared memories or shared stories that are interpreted by an artist. So in some cases, the artist and the story keeper are the same person. In others, it's somebody from the community whose story is being interpreted or augmented or approached by an Indigenous artist. And they're meant to be experienced in the locations of the stories, and then like outdoors. So you hear them through your phone, or you can borrow a MP3 player from the library to experience the story. You can also experience it in the comfort of your own living room on your couch, but it's meant to be experienced out and about in the city. But that's something that we're going to launch this summer.
Right. So look for that. Go to the NAC website and then go to NAC Indigenous, and I'm sure you'll be a button to push there to see these stories. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I come from a place called Lytton, British Columbia. I am Intlakatmak, that's the name of my nation. And I'm from the Lytton First Nation. The Intlakatmak's gene name for that place is Klikumchin. My family in particular comes from a place called Mechampton, or Mechampton, which means many snakes or infested with snakes, however you like. We call it Snake Flat these days, but that's where my family comes from. Yeah, I mean, territorially, it's a pretty large nation. The Lytton First Nation is the largest band, I think, in the nation. But that particular area just locates me within the vicinity of that place. It's a place we call Snake Flat back home.
Right. Yeah. And how big would it have been? How big was the population of the community you grew up in?
Oh, it's about 2,000.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you come to theater?
How did I get into theater?
Yeah.
I got bit by the theater bug by going to university. And I had to do an anthology I did a class that was an anthology of Canadian literature. And in that class was Dry Lips I Moved the Kapuskasing by Thompson Highway. And so I had to memorize a monologue for that class and present it. And it was the first time I had memorized the monologue. Other than the Christmas show when I was 11 years old. And I memorized the Big Joy monologue from that play and did it in front of my class. And it was like, they applauded and I was hooked. It was like having an audience. That was
Yes, okay. Yeah. So step two was
I went to my professor and I said, where do I go to do this for real? And they were like, they put out 3 pamphlets. One was the National Theatre School, the University of Alberta drama program, and Studio 58. And Alberta and Montreal seemed too far away for me. And so I picked up the Studio 58 pamphlet because that was just in Vancouver. And I was at the time in Kamloops. And so I could sort of wrap my mind around moving to Vancouver, but Alberta and Montreal just felt like the other side of the planet. And for a small town BC boy, it felt like another, the other side of the planet. And Alberta, I just thought immediately, oh, it's gonna be too cold. I'm going to U of A. And so I went to Studio 58. It was a bit of a jump even going to Kamloops at the time. I was 17 when I went to university and was on my own for the first time. And so it felt a bit, it was like a baby step,
Yes, baby steps. Yes, I came from Sudbury, which is near Wikwemicong, which I'm familiar with because of I would go there on occasion to the big powwow that was there. And so coming to Toronto was a big step, but I went to York University, so it was just on the edge of Toronto, and I went to residence, so it's pretty safe, even though Sudbury was a larger city than your community, but it still was daunting coming to Toronto, and eventually I eked my way downtown. But so you went to Studio 58, and was acting your discipline?
Yes. Funny fact is actually my father was an actor back in the day as well. Back in the 70s, early 70s, late 60s. And he was in a George Riga play called Grass and Wild Strawberries at the Vancouver Playhouse back in the day that got then artistic director Joy Coghill fired, that play, because there was a simulated pot smoking in the play, and on closing night, an actor lit a real joint up in the theater. And what was happening is because the play was about this intergenerational play between hippies and their parents. And there was a rock band in the production as well called the Collectors. What happened was the older folks would get irritated by the harsh hippie language and the swearing and the rock music and leave at the interval. And the hippies would line up down the street and rebuy those seats and come in, because it was like at the half was a concert. It was the intermission was a rock concert. And so you would have these hippies and these these older folks coming to the theater for a respectable evening in the theater. But anyways, in the final act, there's a moment where one of the characters lights a joint on stage, and on closing night, that was a signal for all the hippies to light a joint as well in the theater. And so in that production, the hippies hotboxed the Vancouver Playhouse, and it caused a riot. Literally the cops came on horseback and were beating hippies over the head with their billy clubs, and and it was a huge kerfuffle. But two remarkable things came out. It remained the highest grossing play of any show at the Vancouver Playhouse, because they double sold half the house every night, because people would buy a ticket and then leave, and then they'd resell the seats and then fill it up again. And it got Joy Coghill fired as the artistic director. But this was the success of the Ecstasy of Rita Joe, right?
Right.
So this was like the follow-up play to that. Got her booted out. And funny enough, like when I was my first production as a professional artist, like I actually booked the gig while I was still at studio in my final year, was with Joy Coghill at the Playhouse in a production of Wit with Shauna McKenna playing the lead role, and like Jim Maison and Alex Golden and all these amazing folks.
Yeah. Okay, so there's an aspect of you that I'm not sure that the Tarragon audience knows, but I mean, I do know this, that you won the Governor General Award for your play Where the Blood Mixes. And so you went from acting to playwriting, or did you go from acting to directing to playwriting?
You know what? There's at studio, it was really like I said, like my theater experience, despite my father having been an actor, starved in the 70s and came home and became a logger, actually. I had very little exposure to theater growing up. Like I had very like an elementary school Christmas play, and then I went to university and read a Thompson Highway play, and then I did intro to drama the following semester, and then I went to Studio 58 and I got it. Like I auditioned and I got in. It was kind of like, and I'd never really even seen like a professional production outside of what Green Thumb toured, like the children's theater company.
Yeah.
When I went to studio, it was my first real exposure to professional theater, like because we'd go see plays and stuff in town. But the training program had mandatory playwriting classes for your early terms, right? And part of the requirement is that you produce your own solo show for your final term. And so there's a solo show class and a playwriting class that you take as part of the program. And I discovered that I just had a knack for it. I had all these stories that I wanted to tell. And I'd always written short stories or poems and songs. And so I was, it turns out that I kind of had a bit of a knack for it, and I really enjoyed it. So throughout my training there, I was writing plays. Others, they did it just for the class, but never followed with it. But I continue to do it. So Where the Blood Mixes, the play that I won the Governor General, started off as my solo show at Studio 58.
Oh, really?
It originated as a character study about my uncle Floyd, called The Ballad of Floyd, that I performed all the characters in the piece, and it was like a 20-minute, 15-minute piece around there. And then after I graduated, I expanded it to a full-length play. And so there is a play that exists that I have in my computer called The Ballad of Floyd, that is a full play that has never seen the stage. That became Where the Blood Mixes. I mean, I did a workshop of The Ballad of Floyd in 2004 at the Factory Theater with Gary Farmer playing Floyd, and that workshop really challenged me to go deeper with it. And so I went back and I reworked it and rewrote it to the point where it was a completely different play, and that's what has become known as Where the Blood Mixes. But this other play still is totally different. Totally exists. And another play too that I'm hoping to premiere next year was originated at theater school at Studio 58. So it's a 20-year-old play that's never been staged yet. Next year we're going to stage it hopefully at the Belfry. And that's a satire about land claims called Little Red Warrior and His Lawyer. I was learning to be an actor, and at the same time I was writing plays. And when I got out of theater school, I just continued on with it. And I was never one to like sit around and wait for the phone to ring. So I realized that investing in the time to write these plays, I could write grants to support that work. I could, begin to workshop it. I made a pact with myself with Where the Blood Mixes that this would be the play, or at the time, The Ballad of Floyd, that this would be the play that taught me about how to write a play, produce a play, get it up on stage. And so I just really made a commitment to it, and it's taken me quite far.
Did your uncle ever see the Ballad of Floyd?
He did, and it was at this point it was he saw Where the Blood Mixes. So when we were developing it, like Western Canada commissioned it, and the Vancouver Playhouse as well. It was like a partnership when we did the original tour. So we did this thing where I did this development workshop tour throughout the interior of British Columbia. And one of the final date on that tour was my reserve in Lytton. And we did it in the community hall. We feasted everybody, like about 300 people came, my family came and stuff. And I was sitting right behind my Uncle Floyd when he was watching a show. And every time his name or a scene that, he would be like, he would be giggling behind his hand. He really got a kick out of
it. Right. So you used his name in the play.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and Where the Blood Mixes. I obviously in the Battle of Floyd, you used.
Yeah, and I mean, like I warned everybody too. I said, look, this isn't my uncle. It's sort of inspired by, and there are amalgamations of characters and things. These are all creations, but I wanted to honor my uncle by naming the character Floyd. Yeah. I'm glad he was honored.
Now, I think that was one of the first plays about residential schools and surviving that.
I don't know if it was the first one. I think there had been a number of plays over the years. I know that I because I was in one back in the 90s. I workshopped one in my early career, like still as a student, one summer. And I know that when I was working on it for the factory theater workshop, there's a lot of conversation about like, oh, why do we have to do this? I know that I when I was writing it, I was getting a lot of pushback from people saying like, oh, why do we have to tell that story and not another one of these stories again? And I personally had never encountered any of these plays that people were talking about. So
I asked this question because it was the first time I had heard of residential schools. Was
really
your play? Yeah,
really.
It said it was about residential schools, and I went, oh, I didn't know anything about it, and so I thought, therefore, I think it was the first, and because it came to such prominence, and I think you won the award, and then it came to Factory. Is that the case?
No, it came to Factory, and then I won the award. So it came to Factory in 2008 for a very limited run. It was only there for, I think, 3 or 4 shows, like a preview and then 3 shows, as part of Luminato, the very first Luminato festival. And so it was a really short run. And then it went immediately to Vancouver, and then it premiered at the Magnetic North Festival on the day of the apology in the House of Commons by Stephen Harper for the residential school atrocities. There was that big famous apology that sort of kicked everything into gear. Well, we opened at Magnetic North Festival in Vancouver on that day, which you can imagine was pretty surreal. Wow. Pretty surreal. I wrote that play in particular because people weren't talking about it. That phenomenon of residential schools and the impact that it had on communities. And I grew up, having grown up in Lytton during a period of time that was awful from suicides. It was an epidemic of suicides in my community in the 80s. As a direct result of the intergenerational abuse and the fallout, the legacy of the St. George's Residential School in my community. It was a terribly troubling time. We were the suicide capital of Canada, and we had a population of 2,000 people, and so it was was incredibly difficult. And so I grew up kind of traumatized and not realizing that I was traumatized. Like, you know, when I was talking about going to university for the first time when I was 17, I was sort of walking around with like undiagnosed PTSD and not realizing what that was even for a good decade and a half. I can look back now and go like, oh, that's what that was. You know, I can see it now, but at the time I was profoundly affected by that era, the era of tragedy. And so I wrote that play to really try to point the finger at the invisible beast that was affecting our community that nobody was talking about at the time.
Yeah. I saw it in Vancouver, and I guess it was Magnetic North. Was Billy Morasti in it?
That's right.
That's right. And he did a great job, Billy.
He was wonderful.
He did a great job. Yeah, you know, he really was. I mean, I knew Billy from Thompson's plays and you know, his work in Toronto, but I think he did a real standout job. Really, he just seemed to flower in that role, and yeah, it was a very moving night. But I didn't connect it to the Harper thing, and I don't think I was there on opening night. I came somewhere in the run of that festival, I believe. I'm not even sure what I was doing in Vancouver now. I can't remember back that far.
The Magnetic North, right?
Yeah. I think, yeah, and it was a great play. And what else have you written since then?
I wrote a play called Thanks for Giving that also was nominated for a Governor General's Award. I came out in 2018. I directed the premiere at the Arts Club Theatre in 2017. In fact, like I got this gig here at the National Arts Center as the artistic director. And I began work on the 17th of October. Well, we closed Thanks for Giving on, you know, I think 3 days before I was to start work here at the NAC. So we had moved all of our stuff out to Ottawa on a truck. We were living in a hotel, and then we opened the show at the Arts Club. The next day we got on a plane and we flew to our new house that we were renting in Ottawa. Our stuff arrived. And then I started work on the Monday. It was
right.
Madness.
No rest.
And I've been going ever since. It's been nonstop.
Yeah,
it's just been nonstop.
Because this is your company, Savage Society, working with the Arts Club. Was that?
No. This is just the Arts Club and me as the writer director.
Right.
It was a part of a thing that the Arts Club does called a Silver Commission. And so they give playwrights about $8,000 to develop a play from concept to first draft. And then they do a reading of that draft. And we did that. And Bill was like, what do you think about doing this next September? This was like in November. Right? So it's our first draft, right? Bill Millard is like, what do you feel about opening the season next year in September? I was like, holy shit.
He was a bit of a risk taker, right? He did that with a number of shows. Like he just said, that's got something, I'll go with it.
Yeah.
And they'll get better. The artists will make it better.
He really he got behind it. He threw whatever resources we needed for it at it, and we did it. How we accomplished my vision of it. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure.
Now, Savage Society has been the primary producer of your work, or do you do other people's work as well?
Savage Society has been a vehicle it started out as a vehicle for me to, like a platform that I built to do my own work. It's evolved to a place now where we're developing the work of other Indigenous artists. So we did a play called Skyborn last year, and by Helena Sparrow. And we have a number of young emerging artists whose work, young playwright creators that we are supporting and developing.
And is one of those Ty?
Ty, yeah. Another one was Taryn Kutneo, who we lost on New Year.
I'm sorry.
Lost him. But his play, White Noise, we developed, and we were looking forward to, we're still looking forward to producing that play as well, with the blessing of his family. But So Ty's work we're supporting.
I mentioned Ty because Ty plays the lead role in The Herd. Dr. Scientist Vanessa Brokenhorn, who's a geneticist and doing research on developing the herd, trying to make the herd pure, the buffalo herd pure. And of course, here she is in her production. I've read her play and was quite intrigued by it as a story of the Métis Nation in Alberta.
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of great that she's getting an opportunity to develop it and keep going further with it. You know, that's fantastic.
I actually hired her for Thanks for Giving. She played one of the lead roles in that play as well, right out of theater school. That was her first gig out of theater school.
Yeah, she's an excellent actress. She's wonderful. Yeah, she was in Toronto for a while. We auditioned her because before she left, and she sent this play, and then she's a pretty good hustler. She sent the play, she got herself an audition, and then she flew back to Vancouver after she was doing with Saggy Chuck or something, and very good, very impressive. I'm so glad that she's in the herd, and having heard the recording, I think she just did a fabulous job.
Yeah, they all did. I thought it was a great recording.
Yeah. So writer to director, did you become your own director because you want to make sure that the first production of your plays was as you saw it?
I've been doing more and more directing of my own work through my community, like through Savage Society. I also do a community project where I go and I write, direct, and sometimes act in these hour-long one-act plays based off of our creation stories with an ensemble of 40 community members. And we've been doing this every summer up until this last one when we got shut down by the pandemic. Just become more confident of directing and being in that role. And some people go like, "Oh, who are you, Morris Panich?" And I'm like, "Oh, it feels, it's why." I understand the importance of, and I totally get the importance of having somebody else interpret your words and have another perspective on your work and to give it a different dimension. But I also value just like trying to execute the original vision and not having to go through other people to try to explain that or get that or have them throw their own agenda into it. There's something, at least with that initial production or something that I'm really close to be able to execute the vision that I have in my head and the reason why I'm writing the play in the first place. I have the skills to direct it. I know what it's like to be the actor on the stage. I know what is required to get the thing to be
right.
And so why not? I think also too, for an Indigenous artist, you want an Indigenous perspective. And also there's like myself and Tara Bagan are the two in Tlakatmuk professional director, actor type playwrights, right? Otherwise, it's someone from another nation with a different context, with a different understanding. And so because my work is about where I'm from for the most part, I think why not,
Do you cast the play before you write or as you write?
I think of people that I sometimes write roles for people.
Right, yeah.
Thanks for Giving, the role of Rita, who's the matriarch of the family, I wrote for Margot Kane. Like I wrote it with her in mind.
Right.
Right. Like I will hear an actor's voice in my head, or I'll think who will be really great in this role, and I sort of write that in mind. But casting is a dynamic process, and you never know what you're going to get when the day comes, right?
So now I just want to ask you, as a writer, have you seen your plays directed by other people?
Oh yeah.
And what's that experience like?
It's a trip. I mean, there's nothing like hearing your words spoken for the first time by somebody else, right? Like that first reading or whatever with other playwrights. So, and then you take that another step with a director who's interpreted your words to a certain degree. I think the biggest, one of the biggest sort of examples of that was when Charles Bender did Where the Blood Mixes, and he's translated it into into French as well, Le Saint-Simon. And we did it here at the NAC in our opening, our inaugural season, one of the first shows, because he could do it in both languages. The company learned it in both English and French, and so it alternated between English and French. And his staging was so imaginative and wonderful and simple. It really blew me away and surprised me. And when I first saw it in Montreal, I didn't even realize the play was starting the way that he sort of staged it. His concept for the production was so wonderful and so wonderfully simple and theatrical. I just loved that, and it just totally surprised me.
So, what other have you seen a production that was terrible of your play? You don't have to name names.
No, I wouldn't say I've seen a production that's terrible. I haven't seen all the productions. I see the one that was in Saskatoon. I was busy doing something else when that was going on.
Right.
And so, but I haven't walked away going like, oh my God. I haven't had that. Fortunately.
So taking over NAC Indigenous and being the first artistic director of this new theater company, what's that been like? Arriving and starting work on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a trip. That's for sure. I mean, it's been quite the journey thus far. I'm halfway through my tenure. Well, at least my contract. My tenure might be longer. I could extend, and I likely will, given that the last year and a bit has been, and the foreseeable future has been totally shut out of the building. So I will very likely extend my tenure. But it's been a trip, because I didn't even get to finish my first season, right? Like, we spent all this time planning for this, and we had to, planning for our first season, we had to cancel halfway through.
Was the herd in your first season?
No.
Okay, it was the year following. Yes. Yeah, it was this year, right? Oh dear, I didn't know that.
It's been a journey. So it's wild. Like, I really, what I think about a lot these days is the conversations we're having as a society, right? Like, and how much that work really impacts institutions. And so we've been doing a lot of that work, as well as trying to curate work and manage and navigate this pandemic. Also the anti-racist and the decolonial work within institutions, especially federal institutions, crown corporations like the NAC. A lot of heavy lifting going on in there for our little department. And, at first it was just a few of us. We do not very many bodies in our team. We're getting more robust now. We've got a lot more capacity than we did, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But, when I first arrived there was just myself. And then we brought in Mari Brakupe, who works as our community outreach officer. And she worked with the education department, and then it was just the two of us. And then finally we got Lori, or Lindsay, and then Lori. Anyways, it was just, it was a slow process of building the team. So it was
right.
And then curating our first season, and what's that going to look like? And oh, by the way, we have a budget for you, but it's, we're not sure where it's going to come from, down the road. So we're hoping the government gives us some money to support our department, and all of those kinds of battles. And so it's been wonderful. It's busy. It's always busy, endless meetings. As you know, as an artistic director, you're just always in Zoom meetings after Zoom meetings. Before, it was just running around the building from meeting to meeting. But it's great. I'm really grateful for the team that we have now, and I look forward to be able to finally do some work, once this pandemic lifts.
What's your sense of it for next year? Are you going more digital, or do you want to say?
We're sort of planning for both in a way. We're like, I personally think that things will hopefully, unless these new variants throw a spanner into the works, that by January, enough people will have been vaxxed by September, and we'll begin to be able to find ways to get back into the building on a regular basis by hopefully January 22. I think that the fall, I know a lot of like music folks are looking towards the fall to be able to start doing things again. I still feel that's a bit ambitious. And I think that we're going to have a lot of work to do still to make people safe and comfortable, and to invite people back into these venues in a safe way, and in a way that, you know, reduces their anxiety about coming back to the venues. So that's going to take a lot of work yet to come. And I don't expect it to get back to the way it was anytime soon, to be honest. I think we'll see more venues opening and be, you know, events happening in venues by next winter, hopefully, fingers crossed. But I don't know how long wearing masks and socially distancing and all of those measures will still have to be in place until we're clear. But I'm optimistic that that's what we're looking at. But still, optimistic is like a year from now.
It feels like it's coming. So just one last question, really, or maybe a couple of questions about the herd. What made you say yes to the herd as a director?
I thought it was a really smart way to address a lot of issues that were sort of running around in the community. And I really love Ken's writing. Ken's a smart guy. And I was really intrigued by the conversation around what is authentic, what is a real authentic, genetically authentic being,
right?
And if it's manipulated, is it still authentic? If it's, you know, if it's in this whole the whole conversation around the cultural relationship to the animal and to the bison, and what that means, and to have them manipulated to be purer, I think is an interesting conversation to have in this time of, you know, all of the social media aspects to it, and all of those, like the call out culture and all of that kind of dynamic that is in play. It's really timely, and I think that it's smart and cheeky, and it sort of pushes all the right buttons.
How have you seen that in your life? The issues of authenticity. Does that happen in your community? Or
like I'm half Native. If you're going to get into the blood quanta conversation, like my father's white, but even on my father's side, my father has got some Cree blood. He has enough Cree in him that he could play on the Native baseball team when they needed an extra pitcher, right? But like basically he grew up as a white guy, right? And on my mother's side, she's in Tlakatmuk. And so, but even on her side, back in around the gold rush era, there's a Scot in there somewhere, and they don't know how he got in there into the bloodline. And my grandparents' parents would never talk about it. Taboo subject in our family for a long time, historically.
Right.
And there's likely also Mexican in there, right? Like from the gold rush era. And so like there's this, you know, but I am into that, right? Culturally, right? Like I'm a member of that First Nation. And so I grew up on the you know, with the conversation or getting into fights on the playground about being a half-breed. For the white kids, I was too Native, and for the Native kids, I was too white. And so that idea of authenticity and blood quantum, and, you know, where do you belong, and who owns you, or who are you a part of? And ultimately, I'm from where I'm from. I don't have any of those sort of looming questions hanging over my head like some folks do.
Right.
But I have grown up with that issue and being confronted with that, because I'm half considered half Native, right? You know, even my uncles used to tease me and say, Kevin, what half of you is Indian and what half of you is white, right? How do you answer as a 10-year-old? How do you answer that question, right?
Right.
Right. So I would say, well, you know, this or that, but like it's always in there. It's always
Well, on that note, Kevin, thank you very much for doing this, and thank you very much for the acoustic version of The Herd. and it's a great job, a great cast. And I hope to see the play version really soon, Kevin, on that Tarragon stage. Okay.
Me too.
All right. And then taking it to Ottawa, your theater.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. It's wonderful.
My pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.